Welcome to the Olympic-themed 2025 utility budget preparation that we're going to be going through today and learning how to budget like a champion for 2025. Quick intro, utility budgets are notoriously difficult to complete. There's a lot of variability in utility costs, and the intention of this is to provide a framework and a guide and some best practices to help you budget as accurately as possible going into 2025. So with that, we'll hit the topics here, which I'll go through. Thank you for taking the time to join. Excited to be here. On our agenda, we're going to do a quick intro. We're going to look at preliminary indications for utility budget impact for 2025. We're going to dive into how you can budget like a champion for 2025, and then next steps too, right? The takeaways from here that we hope will be beneficial and impactful for you as you jump into that during budgeting season here. So with that, quick spoiler alert, wanted to hit the highlights for you as we to give you a summary of the most impactful things going on in 2025 that are going to impact your budget. So first of all, excuse me, energy prices have continued to increase and remain volatile, which is less than beneficial for budget planning, right? Volatility is the enemy of that. Stability is, right, where you have a cost that's known year over year. Whereas with how energy prices and the commodities have behaved over the past year, that's made that a challenge. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit more. There's a certain piece of your energy prices, specifically electricity, called capacity. That's our runner over there on the right side of the screen, top right, that have changed pretty dramatically for 25 and 26. This is a charge that's going to go into effect on June 1st, 2025, and we anticipate it's going to lead to some pretty impactful increases that we're going to have to plan for the budget, for the utility budget for 2025. In the bottom, excuse me, in the bottom left, I'm going to talk about how utilizing a competitive sourcing platform is the number one way you can make your utility costs more predictable. Electricity and supplier agreements, having fixed price agreements, having those known costs is going to be much easier, make budgeting much easier for 2025. And then lastly, our juggler there, using inaccurate information, like anything, right? The numbers are only as good as what you use to develop them, right? So having the most accurate information available to you when you're putting those utility budgets together is going to allow for the most accuracy and decrease your chances for a variance, when we get to the end of 2025. I'm going to talk about how utilizing a competitive sourcing platform is the number one way you can make your utility costs more predictable. Electricity and supplier agreements, having fixed price agreements, having those known costs is going to be much easier, make budgeting much easier for 2025. And then lastly, our juggler there, using inaccurate information, like anything, right? The numbers are only as good as what you use to develop them, right? So having the most accurate information available to you when you're putting those utility budgets together is going to allow for the most accuracy and decrease your chances for a variance, when we get to the end of 2025. So how should we train in 2025? As Olympic athletes, which Seth and I clearly are, we can tell you 100%, at least for utility budgeting. Again, it's been a reoccurring theme the past few years. Utility price increases are lurking, and if they're not planned for and planned appropriately, you could get blindsided. Any planned changes in energy consumption need to be factored in as well. Say, for example, you're doing a lighting project retrofit, right? Or a lighting upgrade, or a chiller replacement, something like that, and you're upgrading to something more efficient. Those are going to impact how many kilowatt hours and therms you use, and those are going to impact your spend. for the year. So we want to take those into consideration. And the as we talked about with electricity and gas supply agreements, the impact of those for 2025 is going to largely be dependent on when those expire. So as you're going to hear Seth and I mention that a few times here, about knowing that, planning for that, planning around that, and setting yourself up for success for the budget planning. The number one way that you're going to be able to budget like a champion is to lock a portion of your utility cost through an electricity or natural gas supplier agreement. So again, that was the last point we mentioned on the previous slide. And it's really, there's not a ton of control you can always exercise for some of these utility costs, for many utility costs, right? The costs are what they are, and some are, you don't even know what they're going to be exactly until you're charged it. So the number one tool, the opportunity for you to take control of the budget and provide some predictability is going to be an electricity and natural gas, if that's applicable, supplier agreement. That'll give you a fixed price, a predictable price, and some budget stability there. So how have electricity and gas commodity markets performed the past couple of years? Well, as our cyclist, I'm sure would tell you, he was fortunately he got tired of pedaling uphill. We saw some significant, almost double-digit, or definitely double-digit from a percentage standpoint, increases back in 2021, 2022. Those have leveled off, which is good news, right? From not continuing to increase. However, that is a new normal, or at least has been the past 18 months plus. And it wasn't we didn't see it come up and come back down, or the prices that the inflationary effects that have increased those have remained. And so that's where those currently stand. Natural gas, on the other hand, as you'll see from our surfer here, did move up quickly like electricity, and then came back down the other side. So our surfers taken advantage of that. From a budgeting standpoint, this could be an opportunity for you to take advantage of as well on your natural gas agreements. So look for opportunities to, they aren't always available, but there are some opportunities to lock in a lower cost for your next natural gas agreement. And if there are, might be worth locking that up for a few years, just because prices are, at pretty desirable levels historically. And of course, our surfer and cyclists and all our Olympic athletes want to know, how can we prevent serious injury? And from a budgeting perspective, serious injury means variance, right? The bigger the budget variance, the bigger the injury, or the more serious the injury. And so, point one there, it is critical, again, to understand when electricity and natural gas agreements are going to expire in either in the upcoming fiscal year or the remainder of the current fiscal year. And if they are expiring next fiscal year or within the next few months before we get into it, we'd strongly suggest reviewing options for that now. And what I mean by that is conducting a competitive bid to look at your supplier options for that and see where they're coming in at. Those options are going to directly impact your budget for 2025. And so this is the most significant opportunity you have to exercise some control over that, and for the board to exercise some control over that. And if you're looking for a rock solid budget heading into 2025, it's best practice to have that supply agreement or that utility price locked in a fixed agreement for that fiscal period that you're forecasting. So for example, if you're looking at, preparing the budget now, your electric agreement expires in June of 2025. We'd suggest reviewing options for that now and locking that so you have that predictability for the fiscal planning, and that's going to allow you to have that budget predictability. So congratulations, you've made it to halfway of being an energy budgeting champion. And to bring us home, I'm going to pass the baton to my fellow Olympic utility budgeting teammate, Seth. And here it is.
Well, thanks, Mike. Happy to grab that virtual baton and take off running with it. And yeah, this is we're halfway there already, right? This is maybe like a 200 so like Mike just mentioned, really a couple of times, having a fixed agreement in place at the time of finalizing your budget is one of the main keys to accurate budget forecasting and avoiding a variance at some point during the year. And then really the training secret the training secret of budgeting champions is to run a competitive RFP to ensure that you're getting the best possible rate in the market at any given time. And really running a competitive RFP process like this helps to illustrate to the board that you've done your due diligence in securing the best possible rate for their building. So now I want to jump, or maybe long jump, back to highlight the overall or overarching game-winning formula for utility budgeting. So I'm not going to read everything here, but I mean, once again, you have to understand where your current supply agreements stand. Are they up in the next year? If they are, you really should figure out those renewals, get those renewals in place before you formalize and finalize that budget, just to ensure it's going to be as accurate as possible. You need to take a look and see if there's any utility charges or changes in utility charges coming up in the next year. And that's not always the easiest thing for you to do. So if you have any questions on that, you can reach out to us, of course, at any time. And then you need to be, tracking that historical monthly usage on a month-to-month basis, just to make sure that you're not missing any variances from usage throughout the year. And I also just want to mention, if all this sounds like a little bit too much to add to your already too busy schedules, then you can reach out to us. This is something we do for all of our clients already, and one thing that you can take off of your to-do list and put onto ours. All right, so switching gears just a little bit here. Maybe we'll call this the final hill before we wrap things up. So Mike was talking a little bit earlier, I mean, particularly when it comes to electricity, about how, costs have increased over time. And one of the ways to help combat that is to essentially bring in other members of that cost fighting team, if you will, to help even the playing field. And so what I'm talking about is really on-site solar, community solar, efficiency projects, HVAC system upgrades, and demand response. All those things that can help lower your costs for utilities long term. This is what we're seeing a lot of other gold medal managers doing now to help combat those kind of perpetually increasing costs into the future. If you haven't looked into these types of projects before, or if it's been a while since you have, they're worth a look or another look, as the ROI makes more sense as the cost of utilities go up. The situation has changed a little bit for on-site solar, depending on where you're at geographically. So it might be worth looking into these again, even if they didn't make sense in the past, or certainly for the first time if you haven't done that before. And this is really it. Congratulations. You've made it to the finish line of becoming a budgeting champion. So just want to do a bit of a victory lap here and reiterate one more time kind of that game-winning approach to accurate utility budgeting. So once again, you have to review those current agreements. You got to know when they're up. If they're up in the next year, now is really the right time to be figuring out those renewals. So that everything's as airtight as it can be before you finalize that budget. And then finally, just make sure you're using appropriate rates and appropriate usage to make those budgets as accurate as possible. Not just adding a couple of percent to the last year's, or assuming that, your usage is going to be the exact same as the past year, that sort of thing. And that's really it. Congratulations. You're now well prepared to be a champion utility budgeter.